Hello, everybody. I'm going to introduce a catchphrase or a concept here. I'm going to call it Belita's counter argument to the Fermi Paradox filters, and it's called bad vision, bad hearing on the side of humans or blind humans, right? First of all, if you're new to the channel and you're new to the concept of what the Fermi Paradox is, let's talk about it. The Fermi Paradox. Enrico Fermi, a scientist, I think he came up with this in the 50s or maybe even earlier, was talking to a bunch of scientists, and he believed that radio was the only ultimate way to alien civilizations would communicate and announce their presence. He felt that every place in the cosmos, at some point, somebody would invent radio and begin using radio for telecommunications. We don't necessarily know that's true. It's a big cosmos, right? For all I know, there could be a civilization out there that invented lasers first, way before it got to radio, or, started communicating with other particles, right? Because, I don't know, technology's weird like that, right? different people in different cultures go down different tracks based on their filters, their thought processes, their cultural influences, things like that, even their geography, right? So interesting. And he said, the cosmos is so big, so old, there's been time for life to evolve and develop technology, and we should be hearing lots of radio. And there's also the concept of a Dyson sphere, where, again, this is not just based on the writings of Freeman Dyson, but also Olaf Stapleton, who was a sci-fi writer, I think, in the 30s, in England. Freeman Dyson also was born in England, and they believed that at some point, a powerful civilization would just start taking its solar system apart, the matter in the solar system, and convert it into either satellites orbiting their star in a huge cloud, sort of taking up all of its light for energy and heat, or literally building a sphere around their star of solid matter. The first scenario is probably a little bit more likely. And they felt that was the inevitable fate once you developed a technological civilization. I have huge problems with that. That just kind of seems very repulsive if you come from a culture that values things like the land and the planet, like Native American cultures, who, there's a lot of cultures out there that don't see the earth as something to be torn up and used, but their mother, right? And taking it apart would be blasphemous. And maybe that's a more sane and universal approach than pure capitalism and pure communism, who kind of both would do something like that, right? So, anyway, the concept comes up. We can't see all this. We can't hear radios. The universe is old. Although, if you think about what we know about the universe and how old this thing could get before life becomes so spread out and attenuated, there's no matter even, right? Although, again, we're new at this, right? The universe is actually fairly new. So one idea is that it's so new and things are so spread out, and we can't see each other. We can't see the other civilizations out there. Because we're new, or we could be the first one. And then another concept that comes up that's not necessarily a Fermi Paradox filter or answer, but it is sort of related to this sort of thinking, which is that Grabby Aliens. I'm watching a podcast right now, a webisode of Isaac Arthur's channel, Grabby Aliens, and the concept is that if you're a technological civilization that develops first in the universe or in your area of space, even if there are 1,000 such civilizations in the universe, they're spread far apart and they kind of haven't detected each other yet, and they start grabbing up systems in their space. we let's say we colonize Alpha Centauri and another system. We start spreading out as a sphere of influence, and we colonize everything within 100 or 200 light year radius. It's going to be really hard for new civilizations to develop within that. I don't think that's completely true. A lot of physicists and cosmologists act as if their ideas or the theories that they ascribe to or create are totally infallible, or that they're absolute truth, but some of them haven't been tested or can't be tested. When white people, especially white Anglo-Saxon Protestants and Quakers and different groups from England came over here, and they came up here and they set up a system designed for their benefit. They threw out a lot of natives or just killed them outright. They brought diseases. They set up a system of slavery and social class and stuff, and it was mostly for their benefit. There were a few other white people from Europe who sort of could be allowed in the system, but they were always subordinates. And they started spreading out across this continent, and they set up their government, their civilization, and sometimes actively destroyed other civilizations. Because as far as I'm concerned, even nomadic groups in the Great Plains and farmer, hunter, gatherers living settled, sedentary lives on the East Coast, that's a civilization. They have buildings, they have structures, they have folklore. They had a symbolic language, more like pictograms that they recorded things in. They had a money exchange system. They had traditions of medicine and child rearing and philosophy. They were civilized, just as civilized as the ancient Greeks or the Romans, in my opinion. They just had certain technological disadvantages compared to them. So even as we were doing this in our sphere of influence, when we moved certain tribes into reservations and other places, they actually developed new cultures. They sometimes merged populations. You had the creation of mixed race Seminoles and things like that, right? You had a certain intellectual culture that developed. For example, Sequoia developed an alphabet for the Cherokee, inspired by what was going on. So I guess it depends on what your definition of new civilizations is. And also there were some tribes like the Sioux and the Apache that resisted us for quite some time. Red Cloud, a Native American leader, actually served the United States a battlefield defeat and negotiated a truce that stood for a long time. So even within a Grabby alien sphere of influence, there could be what if there was successful resistance? What if those aliens in their sphere of influence were able to resist them? And also, what if within your sphere of resistance there are places that are less visited, less supervised, or inhospitable? For example, if human beings colonize all of the nearby star systems, right? And we're all carbon based. We love our rocky planets and we love our organic compounds. But what if there was a alien civilization that lived inside a gas giant or inside a star or inside conditions that we couldn't possibly live in and we would never think to look of? And they were technological, but they were quiet aliens. They didn't necessarily give out radio signals or whatever. They used their technology to live in a very different environment than ours. It fitted their needs, and they didn't necessarily expand their population much, because I think all the Fermi Paradox, Drake equation type things figure that aliens never develop birth control or population control or want to use it, right? They don't really talk about it much. So, we take over a certain area of influence, and we're there for a century or 1,000 years, and we're like, hey, let's take apart this gas giant for resources, and we start doing that, and all of a sudden, there's a civilization in there. and they resist us. And what if they have a sort of technology we could never think of, because our technology was developed to deal with our needs, and they not only successfully resist us, but decide, you know what, we've got to create safety. Let's go out and conquer some of these nearby star systems, and they conquer part of our sphere of influence inside of it, and just say, don't touch, and they're able to enforce it. So again, this is just me playing around with the idea, but let's talk about another thing, and you can call this another Bolita principle, because I'm so tired of like, these European and American white scientists just putting their names on stuff that isn't necessarily theirs. Like, there's a horse in the steppes of Central Asia called, I don't know if it's extinct anymore, called Przewalski's horse, but it had a name before this Russian dude came over there, right? and now the scientific world calls it by the name of this Russian guy who discovered it, but there were people already there looking at it. They could have just said, what is this called? Does it have a name? Right? So yeah, I'm going to start doing it. Bolita principle. Let's call this blind humans. For a Fermi Paradox solution, we assume that the Fermi Paradox is a good way of looking at things, but it sort of assumes that everything, we're able to really see what's there. I mean, imagine a human being who's colorblind thinking, wow, these patterns are nice, but they're so dull and drab because they're all only in two colors, right? Patterns are not that interesting. I don't know why people get so excited about, like my tapestries and things, right? And that person never, ever, ever will see color. We've only been looking for a short time. Our scientific instrumentation gets more and more sophisticated and powerful and accurate as time goes on. But we just may not have reached the point when we can look out at the stars and we can actually see signs of civilization, because it may just be very different than what we're expecting. And then conversely, again, let's go back to the congressional UAP report. Apparently, there have been signs of an advanced civilization that is not part of any known civilization on this planet for at least 60, 70 years, if not for hundreds or thousands of years. And our entire scientific mainstream community has failed to acknowledge it or detect it. Right? I see this when I'm talking to my friends from college. I mentioned the topic of UFOs, UAPs. Some of them have gotten angry and violent, and one of my friends, Trifton, he's a skinny guy, and I was his kung fu teacher in the kung fu club we formed in college, was like, do you believe in evolution? Like that. And I'm like, first of all, that's a separate topic. Secondly, who do you think you are yelling at me like that in my own house? You look like you're going to get up and hit me, and you are not going to. That's not how friends talk to each other. But I mean, we're talking about an emotional mental filter that actually sparked someone who you would think would never be violent. There was a huge look of rage on his face, as if I was a child that, broke a precious vase in front of him, instead of just someone saying, here's an idea. And for some reason, he started linking it to a completely unrelated idea. Now, I'm going to say something. I do have incredible confidence in the theories of evolution, but even that has had to be refined, because originally there was this belief that, the mainstream still kind of thinks of it this way. Traits are inherited from mother and father to the baby, to the offspring, and they're all based on, mutation and natural selection. In other words, you can't necessarily, giraffes don't stretch their necks and make it longer, and then their offsprings are longer because they're willing it into existence. But believe it or not, that was called Lamarckian evolution. But believe it or not, there is something called epigenetics, where if, first of all, if certain things have happened to the progenitors and cause the expression of certain genes that they have, it's more likely the offspring will not only express it, it's more likely that those conditions will affect the prenatal environment. And there are genes that lay dormant in many human beings that are expressed more under certain conditions, which then increases their likelihood of being transferred to the offspring. So it's even more complicated than pure natural selection and random mutation, right? What I'm saying, folks, is we are blind and deaf in the sense that our radar detection and our cameras and infrared and all that are still at a very low level of tech compared to a civilization that may have developed these sensors millions of years ago and kept on developing them. Number two, emotionally, mentally, psychologically, there are many scientists that are blind to the evidence in our own skies. You've got guys like Avi Loeb advocating taking a closer look and opening the mind, and he's being attacked by other scientists and mocked, right? But because of the congressional report, because of actual evidence that is manifested and been released by the government and acknowledged, sometimes grudgingly, he has a basis of argumentation, right? So, yeah, it may not be, the Fermi Paradox may not be what we think it is, because we actually just may not be able to look or able to comprehend the evidence right in front of our faces. Thank you.